Have you ever found yourself haunted by a memory that refuses to fade? A person who keeps showing up, not in your physical world, but in your thoughts, your dreams, your quietest moments. You could be washing dishes, walking home, or scrolling through your phone, and suddenly, they're there again. Someone you haven't seen in years. Someone you don't talk to anymore. Someone you thought you had moved on from. Yet, despite your efforts to focus on the present, they remain. Not every day, not always loud, but consistent, like a whisper echoing in the back of your mind. Why does that happen? Most people assume that if they can't stop thinking about someone, it must mean they're still in love. Or maybe they made a mistake. Or there's something they need to do. But the truth, as Carl Jung suggested, goes much deeper. You see, Jung believed that the unconscious mind is always at work, silently pulling threads from our past into our present. Not to torment us, but to awaken us. The mind doesn't fixate on randomness. It fixates on what carries weight. Emotionally, psychologically, symbolically. The thoughts that stay, especially the ones you didn't ask for, are not intrusions. They are messages. Invitations to understand something unresolved. So if someone keeps reappearing in your mind, it may not be about them at all. It may be about what they represent. Perhaps they remind you of a version of yourself that you lost. Or maybe they reflect a choice you regret, a dream you let go of, or a wound you never fully healed. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's the danger of ignoring these persistent thoughts. You might think you're fine, that you've moved on. But beneath the surface, your unconscious is still holding the weight of something unfinished. Imagine your psyche like a room with many doors. Some are closed because they've been resolved. Others remain open, bleeding energy, leaking memories, keeping the emotional cycle alive. That one person, yes, the one you're thinking about right now. They may be tied to one of those open doors. And until you close it consciously, they'll continue to visit you. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, symbolically. Have you ever heard a song and instantly felt like you were back in a different time? Not just remembering it, but feeling it? That's because your mind stores experiences not by date, but by emotional intensity. You could forget someone's name and still remember the way they made you feel. The mind doesn't measure time like a clock. It moves through emotion. So when someone stays in your thoughts, it's not a malfunction. It's a signal, a breadcrumb trail leading you toward a deeper truth. But here's the twist. This signal isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's about guilt. Sometimes it's shame. Sometimes it's admiration or jealousy or even confusion. And sometimes it's about the version of you that existed when that person was in your life. The mind holds on to what it hasn't finished learning from. It revisits what still has energy. And the more you try to suppress it, the louder it becomes. Not because your mind is broken, but because it's trying to complete a sentence you never finished. So let me ask you, who keeps showing up in your thoughts? What emotion is still attached to them? And what part of you do they reflect that you haven't fully faced? This is where real healing begins, not by chasing them or erasing them, but by listening, by turning inward, by recognizing that their presence is not necessarily about them, but about something inside you calling for attention. Because until that message is heard, it will keep repeating, not to punish you, but to wake you up. Have you ever felt drawn to someone so intensely it almost didn't make sense? Or maybe the opposite, you couldn't stand them, even though they did nothing wrong. A stranger, a coworker, an ex, a friend. Something about them triggered you, deeply, emotionally, instinctively. And you were left wondering, why do they affect me like this? Carl Jung had an answer. He called it projection, a psychological process where we unconsciously place parts of ourselves onto others. You see, the human psyche isn't a neatly organized collection of thoughts and emotions. It's more like a theater, and every person you meet, they become a screen. You don't just see them. You see yourself, reflected, exaggerated, distorted. Projection happens when we disown certain traits within us. Maybe we were taught that anger is bad, so we repress our own. Or we learn to downplay our desires, our ambition, our sensuality, so we bury them. But bury doesn't mean gone. What we push into the unconscious doesn't disappear. It waits. And when we meet someone who mirrors that hidden trait, even slightly, boom, emotion, obsession, aversion, attraction. It's not really about them. It's about what they're reflecting back to you. Let's say you admire someone's confidence. You keep thinking about them. You envy them. Deep down, that might be a signal from your unconscious. This is the part of you that wants to rise. Pay attention. Or maybe you feel irritated by someone who always speaks their mind. You call them arrogant. But what if the truth is you've silenced your own voice for years? Their boldness doesn't offend you. It exposes you. This is the power of projection. It hides behind emotions that feel overwhelming or irrational. Jung called the suppressed part of ourselves the shadowed, the dark, repressed, rejected version of you. But dark doesn't mean evil. It simply means unconscious. And the shadow can contain gold. It can contain qualities you've been taught to fear but are essential to your growth. Power, passion, assertiveness, creativity, even love. And when someone activates your shadow, when they haunt your thoughts, it's usually because they represent something you've disowned, something that is begging to come home. You might say, but I'm not like them at all. And that's exactly the clue. The parts of ourselves we reject the hardest are often the ones we project the loudest. Think about it. Who do you admire most and why? Who triggers you most and how? Your answers aren't just about them. They're maps pointing to the parts of you that need integration. And here's the catch. The more unaware you are of your shadow, the more it controls your relationships. You keep dating the same type, falling into the same patterns. Because the lesson hasn't been integrated yet. You're still projecting. You keep idealizing or demonizing others because they carry pieces of you that you haven't claimed. And that projection builds a fantasy, one that can never fully satisfy because it was never about the other person to begin with. This is why Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Imagine what might happen if, instead of running from those intense emotions, you used them as guides. Instead of saying, why do they affect me this way? You asked, what are they showing me about me? When you do this, everything changes. You stop chasing. You start listening. You stop blaming. You start integrating. This is the path to wholeness. And it begins not by changing the people in your life, but by recognizing the mirror they hold up to you. Have you ever tried to move on from someone? But no matter how much time passes, they still live inside you? You block them. You delete their photos. You avoid every street, every scent, every song that reminds you of them. And still, they show up, not in your inbox, but in your chest, not in your life, but in your dreams. It's like they've been wired into your system, and in a very real, neurological sense, they have. You see, when you form a deep emotional bond with someone, your brain doesn't just remember them. It reorganizes itself around them. Emotional experiences, especially intense ones, create what neuroscientists call neural pathways. Circuits in your brain that associate a person with emotions like love, safety, comfort, or pain. These pathways don't just disappear because a relationship ends. They remain active, waiting to be triggered. That's why a single song can bring you to tears. A smell, a phrase, a photo, and suddenly, you're right back in the moment you thought you escaped. Because emotionally, your brain never left. But it goes deeper. Carl Jung believed that unresolved emotional attachments don't just stay in the mind. They become embedded in the unconscious, shaping our behavior, our identity, our emotional lens. When we avoid processing a painful experience, when we suppress instead of feel, numb instead of grieve, distract instead of understand, we don't delete the pain, we bury it. And the unconscious doesn't forget. It holds on to what hasn't been acknowledged, what hasn't been mourned, what still carries meaning. And that's where the psychological contract comes in. A psychological contract is the unspoken, often unconscious agreement we form in relationships. It's the expectation that this person will be there, that this connection meant something, that the story wasn't supposed to end like this. When that contract is broken, without resolution, without closure, it remains open, incomplete, looping. The mind returns to the person not because you're weak, but because your psyche is still trying to understand. What happened? Why did it end this way? Was I not enough? Did I miss something? These questions don't go away on their own. They echo in your thoughts, whisper through your emotions, and pull you back into a place you thought you had left behind. You may think you're obsessing, but what's really happening is unfinished emotional processing. Your mind is trying to write the last chapter of a story that was torn from your hands mid-sentence. Have you ever had a moment when you thought, I'm finally over them, only to feel shattered again by a simple memory? That's not failure. That's your psyche still trying to integrate what wasn't fully understood. Because letting go isn't forgetting. It's understanding. It's acceptance. It's allowing the truth to be what it is, so that your unconscious no longer needs to revisit it. But there's another reason some people stay etched in our minds. They don't just represent an experience. They represent a version of ourselves. Maybe they remind you of who you were when you were with them. Hopeful, naive, in love, alive. Letting go of them feels like letting go of that version of you. And that's what makes it so hard. Because sometimes we don't just grieve the person, we grieve the future we imagined with them, the version of ourselves that only existed in their presence. It's not just loss, it's identity fracture. That's why the pain lingers, why the memories refuse to fade, why your mind returns again and again, hoping to reclaim what was once whole. But here's the truth. You don't need closure from them. You need closure within yourself. You need to allow yourself to feel what was never fully felt, to say goodbye to the version of you that existed in that relationship, to forgive yourself for what you didn't know, didn't say, or couldn't do. Because healing doesn't mean erasing the connection. It means rewriting the story with a new ending, one where you return to yourself. Have you ever tried to move on from someone, only to feel like the universe won't let you? You stop thinking about them, and then suddenly, their name shows up in a book. You turn on a song randomly, and it's your song. You meet someone new who reminds you eerily of them. And you ask yourself, is this a coincidence? Or something more? Carl Jung didn't believe in coincidences, at least, not the way most people define them. He believed in synchronicity, the experience of meaningful events that seem to be connected, even though they have no clear cause. It's when the outer world reflects what's happening inside you. As if something beyond logic is trying to get your attention. Synchronicity feels like the universe whispering. Look closer. There's meaning here. Maybe you're thinking about someone, and they call. You haven't talked in years, and they appear in a dream. You try to let them go, but signs keep bringing you back to them. Not to torture you, but to awaken you. Because sometimes, it's not about the person at all. It's about what they symbolize. In Jungian psychology, we all carry a deep unconscious language of symbols. Archetypes that help us understand ourselves through patterns, roles, and emotional resonance. The person you can't forget may not just be a person anymore. They may have become an archetype in your psyche. Maybe they represent the lover, a longing for deep emotional connection and acceptance. Or the savior, someone who once gave you hope in a dark time. Or the shadow who triggered your pain, but also revealed your inner wounds. Once someone takes on an archetypal role in your unconscious, they stop being who they were in real life. They become more. They become a mirror, a teacher, a chapter of your personal myth. This is why you still feel drawn to them. Not because of who they are now, but because of what they unlocked in you. The universe, through synchronicity, may be showing you something about your own journey. Maybe it's reminding you of the part of yourself you abandoned. Maybe it's asking you to reclaim your voice, your power, your truth. You see, synchronicities don't demand action. They demand attention. They're not always signs to reach out. Sometimes, they're signs to reach inward. They're symbolic echoes telling you. The lesson is still unfolding. You might wonder, if this is all about me, why does it feel so real? Why does it feel like fate? Because emotional energy creates resonance. The stronger your unresolved emotions, the louder the universe reflects them. You'll keep seeing reminders, not because the past is chasing you, but because your soul is trying to integrate something unfinished. And here's the paradox. You can't move on until you understand why this person still holds meaning. But once you understand, you don't have to chase closure, because it arrives within you. Jung taught that personal growth is the journey of individuation, becoming whole by integrating the unconscious parts of ourselves. When someone remains in your thoughts, appears in your dreams, or seems to follow you through synchronicities, they may be inviting you into that process, to face your patterns, to reclaim your projections, to say goodbye, not to the person, but to the story you attach to them. Because the truth is, you don't need another conversation. You need a new level of awareness. So next time you see their name, hear that song, or feel the sting of memory, pause, ask yourself, what does this person symbolize in my life? What am I being invited to see? What part of myself is asking to return home? Because sometimes, the people who stay on your mind the longest aren't just ghosts from your past. They are messages. And once you receive the message, you are free.